All right, so today we're going to be talking about the SES. It's the Structural Equivalency Worksheet. It's one of the series of documents we're required to submit prior to competing that shows the rules, rules of legality of different components of our vehicle. The SES is very specific to the structures involving the chassis, and then for EVs, the accumulator and rear impact protection as well. It's a bit of a confusing document. I want to start out, it's in an Excel format, and it's big. It's really simple, it's really well broken down, but it's absolutely huge, and that tends to turn people away from it pretty quickly. So I'm going to do two things in this. One, I'm going to bounce between our current year's combustion SES and then a blank SES. The reason I'm starting with the combustion one is some of the categories we'll go into later are much larger and are EV only. So I'd rather start with the simpler combustion chassis and keep it simple for the beginning, and then we'll work our way out. The reason I want to look through a new one is because that's where a lot of people lock up, is when they have to go fill it out for the first time. Sometimes with a continued design, or quite bluntly, if they make a large enough change, you're starting it from scratch. So with that, I want to walk through the document in the way it was written and intended to be walked through as well. The guy who created this very much supports making things easy and learning. So it's a very, very well written Excel document. So to start in the rules, they do outline what the SES is used for. Its primary purpose is reviewing that your chassis meets the rules legality required. That way you don't show up and they find something obvious. A couple notes on that: you're allowed to submit your SES as soon as it's released. I very much recommend doing that at any opportunity you get. We tend to be one of the first ones through. And a lot of that is part of just being on the ball, having an old SES filled out to the new requirements. That way, it's a lot of transferring over information. You're not learning it as you go in the new document. On that note as well, if you're ever designing something for the chassis, just stick it in the SES. It's a great way to no-brainer check, is this something I can do? Am I going to end up changing a value further down the line that I didn't expect or I didn't account for? Quite useful. So we'll start out in a blank one so that we can all see what it looks like. Once again, it's a lot going on. We're going to stay in this very first tab. I'm going to show y'all what the other ones indicate, but we're going to stay in just the first tab. We'll start in the top left corner, but I just want to show the size of the document real quick. So from here over to this wall right here, where this picture ends, that's what we're going to be editing for this page. There's a bunch of examples over here. If you have any trouble with any of the acronyms, everything's written out here. Your rules they're going to ask you to show, some of them are written out here to help you better see, because it's not particular. The bent tubes is a big one because they want to see bent tubes in more than just the left-right 2D axis. They want to see it from the top and from different angles, and that got a lot of people in prior years. So they outline that down here, and then they also outline a couple other recommendations. If you have struggled on bracing from the front bulkhead to the main or to the front hoop, there's a lot of pictures over here showing the different combinations and what yours may look like. A lot of this is done because there was a ton of questions about, does my design fit this? Does my design fit this? So there's a lot of common ways of doing it are shown here, as well as back hoop bracing and then roll hoop rollover. This was changed in the past year, so that's why the head restraint protection is all added. All this is meant to help you. It's useful when you're first going through it. After that, it's good to have as a reference and a check. But hopefully you've read the rules and you know them well enough to be able to interpret them from the text rules so that the pictures act as verifications. So we'll go ahead and start out in the corner, filling out team information. So this document's pretty cool in the fact that it shows you what you're missing and what you still have to fill out. So every category, everywhere you enter some information, it's going to start out blank or EQ, meaning equivalent. The states are outlined here. So if we go down here, we have overall, is it ready to submit for review? No. So as you read from the rules, you have document penalties. If you submit this document and that box still says no, you will get a penalty for it. It is not able to be sent in if you are missing items. So blue indicates that it is blank or incomplete. If you get a red orange, that means that you have failed that box. So you've either entered something illegal or it's too far out, and you'll get that red orange with reject. The sky blue is what we want. That's just pure equivalence. So that box is good. And then yellow is check. There's only a couple categories in here you can end up with a yellow. Generally, it's if you're right on the line, within that very, very small margin of failing a box, or you have just failed a box, because it might still be legal by the rules, but it's going to bring attention to that. If you're ever going through and you're filling it in, you get one of those, you get some other people, get some eyes on it, see if there's something we can do. We'd rather avoid that. The checks just bring more attention to your design, which can have harsh penalties. So the top box is what we're going to start with. Pretty straightforward. You have university name, team name, and you can see here, I've got cap locks on. So as soon as we fill it out, we're going to get an equivalence. If we were to fill all of these out, it's pretty straightforward. So if we were like 23 for this one, or if we were an EV, well, we'll just leave that blank because we're not. You fill out your contacts and your emails. For our team specifically, make sure that our Gmail is included. We do that just to ensure that if it gets bounced back, it's in a team email so that everyone can see it and be sure and get on it and fix it. The other couple things you have in here are your faculty email, and then you have your chassis rule selection. So these are quite important. So we are an all steel tube currently. If the team ever goes to monocoque or does any composite paneling as a part of the structure, that will change what we have to fill out here, and it will end up with an instant reject. So there are two SES sheets. One is if you're just steel tube, EV or IC, and then one is if you have alternative materials in there as well. Second, you have to fill out your powertrain. So this will unlock different tabs and categories further on in the sheet. So something you have to be conscious of out the gate is how we're going to set up our sheet. If you're ever filling this out and for some reason you can't edit a category, this is one of those places you need to go back and check, do I have the right powertrain selected? So we're just going to do internal combustion for now. I'm just going to put X's here just so we can see that this whole category is filled out. If you're helping someone write this sheet, the color coding is awesome for being able to tell where something is and if something is missed. The next thing we have is we have our units, and this affects the entire document. So we have inches or millimeters. You cannot switch between units in this document. You either pick to fill it all out in inches or all in millimeters. Currently, we do it all in inches purely because that's what we started with, and we've rolled with it, right? Some of our accumulators in inches, other parts of it are in millimeters, but for the most part, we operate in inches. Last bit we have here is just entering changelog. I'll show in probably one of the last videos what our correspondence looks like on SESs. It makes a massive difference in your stuff getting reviewed. If you submit them, if they reject it and you submit it back and you give a list of your changes, including what box number specifically you edited, it will make that review all the much quicker. So last thing I kind of want to show in the intro to this before we go into the different tabs is what the different tabs are and what their function is. So this first one is tube chassis. So anything mentioned in here just pertains to the chassis itself. You get into a little bit of rear impact protection over here for the EVs. If you notice, since I've already selected IC power, these are blanked out with equivalents already. The second tab we have is all for EV accumulator. We won't dive into anything in here, but that's just going to be the accumulator. The next tab we have is front protection. So this includes everything from your front wing to your impact attenuator to how your bulkhead's mounted. Using the standard IAs has made this one a lot simpler. We do have SESs from the 2 years when we ran a non-standard IA. So that's a really good example for how the tests were conducted and what information we had to put in here and give. And then next up, we have welded inserts. So any structural tube that does have a hole over 4 millimeters, it has to be marked in here. This one's pretty straightforward. We have examples of it in our EV SES. Our IC does not have any. And lastly, we have bolted members. We as a team have never done bolted members in my time here, and I haven't seen any documentation on any. But this is where those would be filled out. Can't really give much on it because we've never really dealt with this category. Once you have the entire SES filled out, you will see over in this corner, zoom in a bit, you will see each of these tabs I just showed you will show up as either not available, blank, or equivalent, or excuse me, equivalent or not available when you are fully filled out. As you go through this process, it will ask you if you have welded inserts. It'll ask you if you have bolted members. In fact, I'll go ahead and show that now, although this might make this one run a bit long. So down here we have the purple. He tends to highlight purple for the really important things. So it's going to ask us if we have any bolted connections. We do not. That's instantly going to set that category to not applicable. Any holes over 4 millimeters for our combustion? No. And does our steering rack interrupt any required tubes? And the answer is no as well. So we've set these to equivalent, and you can see that for our combustion car, we've decreased it down. We just need to fill out the tube chassis tab, the front protection tab, and we're ready to review. Quite a bit simpler than an EV, or if you had bolted members or welded inserts, which of course will show the stark difference when we get into the EV SES, given that we have welded inserts as well as the accumulator container. Yep, and so that's about it. I mean, the big things to remember is make sure your boxes are all filled out right, and then we'll dive into filling out the individual pages in subsequent videos.